Alright, we are back with a new video, and today we will once again be updating the Survivor 42 Power Rankings following episode 12, the penultimate episode before the season finale, and this will be the final time we'll be updating these Power Rankings before the end of the season, and obviously this is pretty interesting stuff. So again, as usual, I'll be going through each of the players and ranking them based on how likely it is that they'll win the game. However, I also plan to make a separate video probably coming out the day after this one comes out, where I'll be breaking down the different jury scenarios and forecasting how I think each of those might break down, so stay tuned for that as well. But there are 6 players to talk about, and let's get right into the list. So starting off at number 6, we have the boot from this week, and here we have Omar. And I can't say I'm surprised here. I mean, if you've been following these power rankings all season, I've said multiple times how Omar's edit has come off as a bit too perfect, and while I had him relatively high on my power rankings week after week, I always had the caveat of maybe he's a decoy winner, and I feel like this episode pretty much confirmed that suspicion that he was in fact a decoy winner. And again, there isn't too much to say about his round here. I mean, I feel like it was pretty foreshown from early on that he was being set up for a downfall here, and obviously it plays out as usual, and in fact it plays out in a somewhat interesting way where I assume coming in that Jonathan will win immunity, Lindsay would possibly play the idol in herself, and as a result Omar be left in the dust. However, it turns out that Lindsay won immunity, again in a position where she had an idol she could play. Literally the last round she could play this idol through her amulet, and for some reason, despite people saying that she would play it on Omar, she decides to not to for some reason, and we'll definitely get more into that when we talk about Lindsay, but that was a bit of a surprising outcome, at least from an in-game standpoint. However, it's obviously a knock in the sense that Omar and Lindsay weren't more aware of the possibility of a flip and didn't play the idol just to be safe. And again, it's not too surprising from an edit standpoint that Marianne would lead this flip against him, and obviously he'd be sent out in a 3-2-2 vote. And again, I feel like Omar, at least from a game standpoint, played a very strong game on the season. If you ask me, he was definitely the most dominant person throughout the season, with him literally being in the majority for most of the game. He was very well positioned for a lot of the game, obviously building the majority alliance on his initial tribe, and then on the merge tribe, building the initial majority there, really holds it together for a lot of the post-merge and really controls a lot of those votes. However, I do think he starts to let his foot off the gas a bit by voting out High at 8, Andrea at 7. Again, 2 massive shields for him, and at least for Omar, someone that wanted to go to the end with Omar. So obviously that was a pretty big mistake, leaving him to be pretty primed to be taken out at 6 here. So it's not too surprising to see him getting voted out from an in-game standpoint. And even from an edit standpoint, I mean, obviously he was this perfect winner for a lot of the season, getting this perfect edit. And as I said, in multiple of these power rankings, I had a suspicion that he would probably be taken out. Now, granted, he made it quite a bit further than what I was expecting for a decoy winner, especially for a decoy winner that was set up from so early in the season. However, if we're following the trends of recent seasons of Survivor, I mean, most of these seasons have at least one decoy winner. I mean, 41, you had Tiffany for a lot of the pre-merge, and really by extension, a lot of those Yasa members feeling like the complex tribe and really feeling like they could have had the winner, but obviously that was wrong. Winners at War, you had another decoy edit with Sophie getting a lot of content there. Edge of Extinction, of course, you also have Rick Devens being a decoy winner. So again, if we're looking at recent seasons, a lot of them do have this style of editing where at least one person is being set up as a winner. And even beyond Survivor US, I mean, we literally saw on the most recent season of SA, Immunity Island, where Anesu gave off very similar vibes in her edit for a lot of it, where again, she was just ticking off all of the typical winner edit tropes for a lot of the season, and then ultimately she was taken out at the final 8. So Omar definitely had a lot of similarities in that regard, which did not bode well for his long-term chances. So again, from an edit standpoint, I felt like I had reason to believe that maybe this edit wasn't what it was stacked up to be. And to be fair, I mean, he did make it further than what I was expecting him to. However, by the end, Marianne does outplay him, and he is taken out as a result. And again, I feel like Omar did play a good game at the end of the day, but again, he came up short. So because of that, I'm here at number 6. And with that, we are now talking about the 5 players still in the game, the 5 players that have made it to the finale. And as usual, I'll be ranking them based on how likely it is that they'll win the game from this point. And honestly, now that Omar's out of the game, this list is kind of boring, but I'll go through it anyway. And at number 5, the person I think is the least likely to win Survivor 42 is Romeo. I mean, again, I've said this before, I'll say it again. I don't think Romeo's winning this game. I do think there is a somewhat realistic chance he could get the final tribal. However, he's probably not going to have that much respect on the jury, probably isn't going to win in a lot of scenarios. But even then, I don't think it's guaranteed he gets to the end. I could very well see him going out in fire at 4, especially if Lindsay or Jonathan end up winning out from this point. I feel like that could definitely put Romeo in danger. But I think more than likely he will get the final tribal and probably lose at the end of the day. So it's not looking too great from that. And even this episode, yes, well, he kinda isn't on the plan. I mean, credit to him that he finally gets included on a plan that goes through. I mean, he was still the backup target. He would have gone home on the revote had, like Lindsay played the idol on Omar, so that's not great. And again, from an in-game standpoint, he's pretty much drawing dead. So because of that, I'm here at number 5. Now we're moving on to number 4, and we have a bit of a similar person to talk about, and here we have Jonathan. And I know that I was low on Jonathan the preseason, a bit too low, and obviously low during a lot of the early season, only to come up on him over time. But at this point, I've kind of settled back down on him not winning. And again, his path forward is a bit tricky. I mean, I feel like if Lindsay wins Final 5 immunity, he's essentially toast. I mean, unless they decide to throw the votes under Romeo, but I don't see much reason for him to be kept around at 5, with the exception of Mike possibly voting to save him. But even then, I don't think that alone will be enough. I feel like he basically needs anyone other than Lindsay to win that Final 5 immunity. And then from there, I mean, he'll probably have to go into fire unless he wins Final 4 immunity there. But even if he gets to the end, again, similar to Romeo, I don't think he's going to have that much respect on the jury. I don't think a lot of people are going to reward someone like him with the win, someone who is perceived as this very physical player. I feel like these people are going to look for something a bit more based around either social strategy or someone with a bit of a stronger storyline. I don't think they see Jonathan as fitting that bill. And plus, he's gotten plenty of negativity as of late. That's not great. So again, it's not looking great for Jonathan, but there is at least somewhat of a path forward for him to get to the end. And because of that, I'm here at number 4. Now we're moving on to number 3, and I wanted to put this person a little bit higher, but I'm just not feeling great about them actually getting to the end. And here we have Lindsay. And I talked a bit about this when I mentioned Omar, but I'll say it with Lindsay. I think it was a pretty bad move of her to not play the idol there. Obviously, we see in the episode that her rationale is that she's worried that the idol will be recirculated. But considering the fact that her idol could only be played up until the final 6, this was literally the last round it could have been played. I mean, by her logic, it would have been recirculated anyway. And if not, I mean, it's only one more round, and there's really no excuse to not play the idol on Omar in the situation. So that's not great. The fact that she essentially opens it up for the other players to flip on them isn't great, especially when it could have been avoided. That's not great. I mean, she does win immunity, so there's that. However, I feel like her trajectory in the game is pretty narrow at this point, where I feel like she essentially has to win out. If she does not win Final 5 immunity, I think she is toast. I mean, I don't see anyone really having much reason to keep her around at this point, especially when she's been so closely aligned to Omar and seems to be a pretty big jury threat coming into it, if I'm being honest. I feel like if she were to get to the end, I feel like she would get a lot of the votes that someone like Omar would get, and she would be able to take a lot of the credit for stuff that Omar and the Taku 4 were able to do throughout the game. So because of that, I don't feel like anyone's going to have much reason to keep her around. And plus her edit, I mean, yes, people have been praising her edit for having a recent upward trajectory. However, given how little she's gotten up to this point, I feel like she is someone who is primed to be taken out at the final 5 or if not, maybe losing Final Four fire making. But it very much comes off as someone who is the final obstacle for the eventual winner. And considering I don't think Lindsay is the clear cut winner at this point, I feel like she is someone who, again, will probably be perceived as a big threat, someone who may win Final Five immunity, but certainly not actually get the final tribal, and will be taken out the first opportunity due to being such a big threat. So I feel like from an in-game perspective, and even from a edit perspective, that seems to be her trajectory at this point. And again, considering the top two people are people I feel like have a very strong chance of getting to final tribal, I can't really justify putting her too high, but she's here at number 3. Now we're moving on to number 2, and I can see some people complaining about this selection, particularly this person being above Lindsay. And I agree in the sense that this person has less win equity than Lindsay, but I also think this person is a lot more likely to get the final tribal than Lindsay. But here we do have Mike. And again, I feel like Mike is very likely to get the final tribal at this point, as he isn't the biggest target on the board. I feel like Lindsay and Jonathan are by far the bigger targets coming into it. And even if he goes to fire at Final Four, I mean, he's a firefighter, so I would assume that he would be pretty good at making fire. So there's that. And just looking at his edit, I don't really see him having a downfall before the final tribal anyway. So I feel like it's very likely that he'll actually get to the end. The issue is winning, and obviously I alluded to this a bit in some previous videos, but I feel like Mike has a really negative perception on the jury. I feel like there are multiple people in the jury who see him as emotional, who don't think that he plays the game strategically, and is someone that takes things a bit more personally than he probably should. That's not great. And obviously with this latest round, really these last couple of rounds, I mean, he isn't really the center of a lot of those game moves being made. And yes, while we have heard a strategy of wanting to hide behind these puppets, really being the puppet for these other big players, again, I don't think that's a very effective strategy this late in the game. Again, would have been one thing if that was his strategy coming into the game, if that was his strategy during the pre-merge and a lot of the mid-merge. However, the fact that we really only hear about the strategy in the post-merge and this late in the game, and him not really being the forefront of these big moves, taking out all these big players, is going to be a problem for him on the jury as well. So I think he very much has an issue with perception, and that's really going to cost him at the end. However, compared to Lindsay, I think he is more likely to get there in the first place. I feel like Lindsay is gone at the first opportunity. And even Jonathan, I mean, Jonathan isn't entirely safe either, so that's not great. I feel like Mike is definitely probably the second or third most likely person to be a final tribal, which is more than I can say for Jonathan or Lindsay. But again, he is not winning this game, in my opinion, at this point. I know there was a decent chunk of the season where I thought maybe he'd be the winner based on his edit, but I feel like at this point, he's just been undermined so much, and there is enough evidence of his game, to where I don't think a jury would actually reward it, and particularly not this jury. So because of that, he is here at number 2. And now at number 1, the person I think is the most likely to win Survivor 42 is Marianne. And at this point, it's not even close. I mean, yes, she was kind of close with Omar for the last couple of episodes, but now that Omar's out of the game, and now that she has gotten pretty much sole credit for the move to flip on Omar, I mean, how can she not win the game at this point? I mean, I know it's sort of crazy how I did have my suspicions for a lot of the season based on her edit, making me think that she was a bit of a big character and that maybe they wouldn't go out of their way to do that if she really was the winner. But I feel like through the season and thinking about it more and more, I mean, she has the storyline for a win. I mean, she's had that strong premiere where she talks about being a weird kid and how she wants to prove that people like her can win this game. That's great. She's gotten relatively consistent content during the pre-merge, including setup for eventually flipping on the Takus. That's good. And obviously in the post-merge, I mean, yes, while she isn't in the driver's seat for a lot of it, I mean, she has gotten plenty of good moments. I mean, she has the moment of her finding the idol and using it to potentially change the game. That's good. There is, in the previous episode, there was her talking about her wanting to have fun and that being presented in a positive light. That's good. And then this episode was essentially her coronation, where she, again, all this setup for her flipping on Taku finally comes into fruition. and she uses her extra vote and getting the people on her side to blindside the biggest player of the game, the biggest Taku left in the game in Omar. And the fact that she gets the primary credit for this is so good, in my opinion. And this is clearly her move. Like, this is something that will definitely demonstrate to the jury that she is a big player that's willing to make big moves. And we see with, by the way, Omar reacts to his blind side, how he turns to Marianne right before the last vote is read, and he's like, "It was that you?" And she's like, "Yep." And he's just impressed more than anything else. And again, he's not the first person to do so. I mean, pretty much since the high boot, everyone that's been voted out has pretty much taken it in stride, basically been a good sport about it. But again, the fact that we see Omar like literally like immediately praise Marianne for this move is definitely a good sign for her jury's chances. I think the jury, even outside of Omar, will definitely see this as her move, and that's a good storyline for her. And then coming into Final Tribal, I mean, she has a very clear path to Final Tribal. She has an idol, so she's guaranteed Final Four. Fire making, which again, if this were an older season, maybe not 100% guarantee, but with her literally having an idol to get to the Final Four, where at that point she's at least guaranteed fire, is a pretty good sign. I feel like Romeo would take her to the end, like not even put her through fire. So she literally has a 50% chance of not even having to go into fire. And then even Mike, I mean, if Mike wins final immunity in a spot where Lindsay's already gone, I mean, I think there's a chance that he saves Marianne as well and basically forces Jonathan to go into fire. So I think there is plenty of pass for Marianne to get to the end. And with her having this story that she can tell to the jury about how she was a weird kid and how she definitely came into the season being underestimated and how she continued to push through until she made her move of blindside the biggest player in the game. I mean, that is a pretty strong resume, and especially for comparing it to the rest of the players that I think are likely. I mean, I think she wins against all of them. I mean, Lindsay's a bit tough. I mean, we'll talk about that more in the jury scenarios video, but I think Marianne has such a clear path to a win at this point. And again, with her edit, showing her storyline and her development throughout the season and her having a consistent enough presence to where she has been a decent contender for a lot of the season. I mean, I don't see how she doesn't win this season at this point. I mean, unless they're going for a complete blindside at the end, but I don't think that's going to happen per se, but you never know. So I feel like there's just so much evidence based on the edit and from the game, based on how I understand it, that points to Marianne winning, and it's not even close at this point. So for all those reasons, I think Marianne is the most likely person to win Survivor 42. And there we go. That will do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out with the channel. Now, as I said at the beginning of the video, I am planning to make another video before the finale where I go through the different jury scenarios and break down their likelihood and how I think they would break down. So stay tuned for that. I also am covering The Circle. That's wrapping up next week as well. And I do have some more general videos coming out soon, so stay tuned for that. But for now, that is the video. See ya.